Just please be with me in silence for a few minutes. Okay, slowly opening your eyes. So first of all, I need to say that I'm very honored and humbled to be here. I'm particularly thankful to John for having introduced me to the conference. It's my first time, and it's been really good to sit here throughout the weekend and absorb some of the offerings that have come from so many different and yet unified perspectives. Now, I'm not a practicing psychotherapist, although I have spoken with many, many people who want an answer to the question of why am I suffering and what is the way out of suffering. Neither have I had the good fortune of coming from a lineage or tradition, nor have I been exposed to the many, many wonderful Western teachers, especially here in the Bay Area, in this part of California, where East meets West. I come from England, if you can't tell, having just landed here 5 months ago, like a pilgrim, with nothing, just myself and my husband, starting life afresh. So this is our home now. So I come empty-handed in some way. I come without theory or dogma or model or traditional language. My awakening has been carved out of the raw, sometimes excruciating edges of my own experience. Unexpectedly, because I wasn't seeking enlightenment. I was seeking happiness and love. So waking up out of the dream of separation was quite a surprise and a relief. But it doesn't stop there. Then there's the whole journey of embodiment, where the whole of the human experience, every detail, every aspect, every relationship, and I don't just mean relationship to another human being, but the relationship to everything. The relationship to our bodies, the relationship to how we eat, the relationship to our finances, how we manage the income and the outgoing. Our relationship to the totality, our relationship to our feelings, our thoughts, our inner world, our outer world. All of it comes rushing in into the light of awakeness, to be seen and to be resolved in that light. And along the way, there's been a plethora of psycho-spiritual practices, from many different types of meditative practices to body-centered practices to primal therapy to depth psychology. All of this has been included in the, let's call it, purification of the mind-body vehicle, the vessel through which the light of awakeness can move and express itself in the world. So unworthiness, it has been in some ways a steady companion. It's no longer here as my experience. So I'm going to dig into some of my memory banks, because the story of my life doesn't have much substance to it anymore. It's not something that's referred back to or clung to. It's not sticky. And it's kind of surprising even to me, because I was kind of a black hole of a person. My emotions were so repressed and so suppressed and so convoluted and so dark that it's almost like I would suck the whole world in with me. So I wasn't really a very pleasant, let's say comfortable person to be around, and I certainly wasn't comfortable with myself. So, it's like unworthiness, when I look back on it, has been at the core of it. From the moment of my birth, that was unworthy. From the moment of my birth, I've experienced many traumas and dramatic events. My birth was dramatic for my mother. My father left to have a relationship with a prostitute in a country where this was very shameful. Divorce was unknown. So it was secret, it was explosive, it was covered up with layers of lies. I didn't know my roots. My mother had extremely violent feelings that not only penetrated the womb, so they were absorbed, but kind of shock and trauma and drama were part of my story that gave rise to a sense of, I think somebody mentioned it in one of the talks, of being a worm. felt like a worm, maybe like a wormhole. You know, it's like everything just went involuted. I was semi-adopted. I didn't know that till I was 13, and the world came crashing down when my so-called father told me in a fit of rage and shame that he was not my father. There was a lack of safety and stability and identity. We moved home so many times dramatically. I was present in the middle of a war with bombs flying around us and death imminent. I became mute for a year and a half. I never said a word. There was no holding from the parents. And so it went on. There was emotional abuse, sexual abuse. I could go on, but so I spent a lot of time looking for approval and salvation outside of myself. Most of my childhood, I seem to remember, I prayed every night to Jesus to save me. I didn't come from a religious family, but somehow it felt like what I needed to do. I prayed to the Holy Mother to take care of me. I spent a lot of time in my inner fantasy world where everything was perfect. I was perfect, my parents were perfect, my world was perfect. I knew I was loved, I knew I was worthy. But none of it was true in my human reality, only in my fantasy. And when that sort of ran its course, and that utopia, that inner utopia, no longer served as a safety net, I turned to my attention to salvation from a PhD. If only I could get a PhD in psychology, then I would be worthy. I'd prove to the world that I was good enough, despite my brokenness, despite my ridiculous background, my broken family situation. My mother was semi-illiterate. My parents both spoke different languages from each other. Neither of them understood each other. I didn't really understand them. And yet I spoke perfect English. It's kind of like, did my head in. Didn't make sense, but somehow the PhD was going to save me. And then when that didn't work, I turned my attention to spirituality. The unworthiness is really the belief that I am not enough. Let's take the good out of it. It's not even I am good enough, although it has that offshoot to it. It's I am not enough. I am not enough as I am. And it doesn't have to, it is not necessarily to do with having traumatic events happen, although that is very much part of the picture. But it drives most of humanity, the sense that I am not enough. It's a universal wound. And because in the unconscious state, most people are out of touch with beingness, that I am not enough gets confused with I do not have enough. And so the search starts to accumulate more money, more recognition, more knowledge, more love, more security, more comfort, more enlightenment, and so on. So it drives the majority, if not all, of unconscious behavior. works for a while, whilst you have what you seek. But inevitably, that gets taken away. It's like the external evidence for our worthiness, wherever we look for it, whatever it is that we find meaningful, whether it's relationship, whether it's success, whether it's financial, wealth. That evidence that we need to prove to ourselves that we're worthy is based on shifting sands. Because everything in the world comes and goes. Everything that rises falls, everything that is gained is lost, everything that ebbs flows. This is the nature of life's vicissitudes, the ever-changing nature of form of the world. So if we base our self-worth on that evidence, that external evidence that proves to ourselves that we now have what we want, therefore I must be enough. I must be good enough, or loved enough, or successful enough, or safe enough, or enlightened enough. As long as it's based on that, then we ping-pong between worthiness and unworthiness. And that ping-pong is the suffering. It's a perpetuation of the seeking mechanism. Seeking mechanism of egoic consciousness that seeks fulfillment by getting what it wants. Once it gets what it wants, it's temporarily relieved or fulfilled, inevitably, because what it gets is in the world of form. And when I say the world of form, I also mean the inner form of our thoughts and feelings. So when we accumulate enough thoughts of positivity and happiness, and feeling loved and feeling lovable and so on. So whether it's inner form or outer form, it's still form. Because what the ego gets is in the world of form, inevitably that dissipates back into the world of formlessness, because everything that is born into form also dies into formlessness. Every feeling comes and goes, every thought comes and goes, every relationship comes and goes, even your body comes and goes. Then there is a sense of loss, and the fulfillment that was so available and held on to seems to be lost, and so the search starts again. It's the seeking mechanism. It's the same with enlightenment or awakening. We have the spiritual experience, the awakened experience, the transcendent experience, and inevitably that experience fades away. So then we start seeking again, and so it goes on. The seeking mechanism operates in the horizontal dimension. It's always on a horizontal dimension. So that's the world of polarity, worthiness and unworthiness, pleasure and pain, good and bad, dark and light, and so on and so on. As long as we look for our worthiness, our sense of self-worth, in that dimension, then it is bound to fail. So a lot of attention, a lot of effort is given to the acquisition of psychological and spiritual tools to move to one side of that continuum, which is self-worth. A lot of attention is given to improve, tools for improving self-esteem, for perfecting the personality, for fixing what's wrong, for cultivating positive thinking, for manifesting what we want, law of attraction, for creating abundance in whichever area of life is meaningful to us, for attracting the perfect relationship, your soulmate, and for arriving at the holy grail of awakening or enlightenment, where you no longer have to feel any more pain. I've tried all of those, and they didn't work. Now, that's not to deny the very real and good work that happens on a psychotherapeutic level in meeting the personal wounds of unworthiness in the way that have been described this weekend. That is necessary and good work. But I think, as we've heard over and over again, it's not about fixing what's wrong. It's not about providing a remedy that takes the pain away once and for all. It's about meeting what's here. So that's not to be glossed over or denied. But if you want to get to the root of unworthiness, a much deeper inquiry needs to be included in that. There was a time after I gave up seeking anything. One of my main things was seeking love from a relationship. I really believed in the idea of a soulmate. And every time I thought I'd found my soulmate, inevitably they weren't. And the agony of that, the drama of that, the hell of that was too much to bear. Somehow over time I saw through the fallacy of seeking love. I saw through the fallacy of seeking recognition. I saw through the fallacy of seeking spiritual knowledge, or a spiritual safety net even. I spent a lot of time in India at that point, so I learnt about surrender. I learnt about surrender to the heart of darkness. India is a ruthless teacher. We often think of India as somewhere beautiful and transcendent and spiritual and so on, and yes, but she's also dark. She's like the dark mother, who, if you're open and willing, reveals everything that is unresolved in you. So India was my real teacher. And I learnt about surrender. So there came a point where there was no more seeking, just to surrender to life with all its vicissitudes, knowing that none of it was real in some ways, and yet fully experienced. So it came as a surprise when this experience of inner barrenness, a dark landscape that I call the dark night of the soul, that had no end to it, revealed itself. And it had no story in it. It wasn't about what was happening in my life. It wasn't hooked in to anything, to any circumstance. Sort of devoid of meaning. And yet it was definitely here. I've only heard Adyashanti speak twice, but what he spoke of on Friday, I recognize as this that I'm about to describe. That in the barren landscape that lasted for several months, there came a point where I was somehow willing to give everything to that. That there was no more turning away or hiding or running away or following the maneuvers of my mind that created strategies of not facing this dark abyss. It's that fist in the belly. It's that primal wound, the terror of annihilation of self. Now, I didn't have the spiritual concepts or language around it at the time, but I recognize it now as that. And I also recognize that that same feeling had been around ever since I was a child. And in my adolescent years and my early adulthood years had led me to the brink of suicide many times. I was one of those people that visited many psychotherapists and psychiatrists, and they couldn't do anything for me because I wouldn't speak. And so I was impenetrable, and that impenetrability led me to want to extinguish this entity called me. It was unbearable. So I recognized this many years later, even though I wasn't on the brink of suicide, but it had the same texture, the same flavor, the same darkness. I had a lot more awareness by then and a lot more capacity to be with the feelings. And so I was willing to give myself to that without any expectation of anything happening at all, without any agenda of outcome. No idea that if I surrender to this darkness, then I will wake up. None of that. I didn't have those concepts. All I knew was that there was no way out but this. And something in me, let's call it surrendered. We could also just say relaxed. The knot, the contractive knot of self, just let go. And with that came a slight thought, a whisper of a thought, was that if I die and there's no more me, then so be it. So be it. If I stay in this darkness, in this abyss, for eternity, so be it. If this is the truth, and this is the way, so be it. So really what was happening there was all concern for me and the primal survival. That's not where the attention was. What happened was I experienced an existential aloneness, which is what I mean about getting to the root of unworthiness. Beyond the personal story of the wounds and how we feel and what happened to us, beyond that, there is something more primary and more primal. And that is the existential aloneness that we must each face if we are to be truly free. Existential aloneness is the core wound of separation. the core wound of separation that takes place, if you like, as consciousness incarnates into form. It's very subtle, but it's not personal. When it's truly experienced as that, and I don't mean intellectually but viscerally, then it gives rise to great compassion, humility, and graciousness. Because everything that is born into form in some way experiences that, not necessarily consciously, but simply because of the fact that it's born into form. If we really drink that in, it breaks our hearts. It opens us. To the very fact of existence. Existence itself breaks our hearts open. I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. But let me just go back to the existential aloneness. Before it can be experienced in its universal form, let's say its more pure form, it can also be experienced, and is likely to be experienced, as existential abandonment. Yeah, slightly different. There are layers and layers. Existential abandonment. Who's experienced that? I expect all hands. Yeah, existential abandonment. Let's see. Now, I'm not really familiar with the Enneagram, but I understand that some Enneagram types are more attuned to that. I think the 4 and the 5. Yeah? Is that right? My mother was a 4, I'm a 5. 4, 5? Yeah. Yeah, I'm more attuned to that. But it's a universal human energetic template, if you like, some part of our human geometry. Yeah. Some of us may experience it more naturally, if you like. We just go there really easily. I know I go there really easily. I went there really easily as a child, and some people may have to turn their attention to it more consciously if you really want to get to the root of unworthiness and be free. Yeah? Then it becomes a practice. It wasn't a practice for me, it's just what I fell into very naturally over and over again. So existential abandonment. The sense that you and you alone stand outside of existence. That you and you alone have been excluded from the kingdom of heaven. That you and you alone are unloved and unlovable. Existential abandonment is the personalization of the more subtle and more primary wound of existential aloneness. Existential aloneness is the raw fact that the I that you experience as yourself, the I through which you perceive, is absolutely alone. When the I that you perceive through, or as, dies, that's the end of you. Born alone and dies alone. We may be able to connect. We may be able to have a very strong and even abiding sense of unity. But that does not take away from the fact that the I is existentially alone. Now it's interesting that alone is the same as all one. Let me say a little bit more about that. When I surrendered to existential aloneness, which was experienced first as existential abandonment. Not only have I been abandoned on many levels throughout my life, by my mother, by my father, by my home country with the war, by the loss of all possessions, by the loss of home, by the loss of my academic accolade, which I had spent 12 years studying for a PhD. And at the very last moment, it disappeared. Life came crashing down. And so on and so forth. Not only had I been abandoned in my relationship with men, but none of that had been worked on and looked at and in some ways resolved. Attention wasn't on that. But the wound of existential abandonment was recognized in that moment of surrender to the abyss. The possibility of complete extinguishment was experienced as an abandonment by God. Now again, I'm using the word God as consciousness, as the totality, as existence itself, creation, that which exists, that which we experience, see, know, feel, touch, taste, the totality. That's what I mean by God. But I experienced that in a nanosecond as the ultimate form of separation. That I was excluded, and I only was excluded from God's love. Therefore, I was completely unworthy, unlovable, unloving. And therefore, in some ways, deserving of complete annihilation. As that was seen, I also saw the seeking mechanism that had driven all of my life and created a fortress around that excruciating belief. And I was willing to surrender that fortress, to give it up. And so in that moment, I died into the abyss. I allowed myself to be extinguished. And in that extinguishment, I was absorbed into an eternity of unknown emptiness. That was the visceral feeling and experience. Now somehow the mind is still operating throughout all of that, and I thought it would end there. This all happened very quickly. I'm talking about moments. Somehow it would end there, and there'd be just this cold nothingness, an eternity of unknown emptiness. But what happened was that abandonment became aloneness, and that aloneness became all oneness. I merged with the totality, and it became the fullness of love. It had nothing to do with how I was feeling. It had nothing to do with the circumstances of my life. It had nothing to do with anything that was acquired or gained or fixed or improved. Nothing. It simply was of itself. That the emptiness, the eternal emptiness of being, the abyss of being, was scintillatingly alive with shimmering love. Not the love of anything. It had nothing to do with content. Just an indescribable love that was experienced as fullness, the fullness of God, the fullness of existence. Emptiness and fullness became one. Now the surprising thing to me was from that point on, without any trying, without any effort, without any practice, without anything, the story of being a victim of life, of being abandoned, of being unworthy, of being unloved, and any other thread of being a victim, even the thread of being a victim of my own thinking. Do you notice that when we have positive thoughts, or there's a sense of being free of thoughts, or space between thoughts, we actually feel good about ourselves. And then the thoughts come crowding in, or we have some negative thoughts, or difficult thoughts, and somehow we overlay that with a bit of self-beating, self-berating. Oh, I failed, or I'm not good enough. I better try again. Better meditate more. Or practice creating space between my thoughts, and so on. But I was no longer a victim of my thinking or my feeling. I was no longer a victim of my circumstances. And there was no longer any need to get love from anything or anyone. About a year later, I realized that was freedom. That stopped the ping pong. That stopped the operating in a horizontal dimension. From that point on, the human experience is experienced in and from and as the verticality of being. Now, of course, we can say a lot about the embodiment and the human experience that is included in that, so I'm not denying that. And the human experience is messy and everything comes rushing in and the personality keeps operating and so on and so on. So I'm not speaking of spiritual bypassing here. But I'm not going to really concentrate on that side of it unless there's questions around it, because I really want to offer just a deeper dimension from a very ordinary human being to say that this is available. Yeah? This level of freedom from the ping pong of our own thinking and feeling is very available. I think, was it Ari Goldman the other day said something about that? Can't remember the exact phrase from Milarepa, but that was it. Does anyone remember it? Somebody wrote it down.
Something about confusion.
Here, I have it.
When wisdom and confusion are seen as...
When you don't see wisdom and disturbing emotion as different, you have seen all there is to see.
That's it. That encapsulates it.
Could you repeat it?
Sure.
When you don't see wisdom and disturbing emotion as different, you have seen all there is to see.
When you don't see wisdom and disturbing emotion as different, you have seen all you need to see. You have realized all you need to realize. That is freedom. So it's not about creating a perfect inner world. It's about having no division against what appears. No inner division. So you operate from wholeness, from unity. When you operate from unity or wholeness, the abundance of this moment and each moment is available. There's no more need to feel abundance. Very often we want to feel abundant. Abundant in love, abundant in joy, abundant in peace, abundant in connection. And so on and so on. Somehow feeling abundant makes us feel worthy, whereas feeling lack makes us feel unworthy. But when that whole construct collapses, because self is not separate from the totality, there is no inside, no outside. There is only this, and everything appears in this as you. The world appears in you as you. The world is not doing things to you, bad things or good things. All of that is generated within you, within consciousness, within awareness, within the space that is the eye that sees. In that sense, the I is absolutely alone, but the I is totally one with everything. Even saying one with everything creates a separation. If I am one with everything, there must be an I and an everything. But that's not true. Yeah? So I don't know if there are any words that really describe this. The best way I can describe it is that everything, you, the world, the circumstances, the events, Donald Trump, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on, is experienced in you as you. It's not that the self claims ownership of it. It's just that there can't possibly be any separation. The idea that you stand outside of existence, that there's a you, a me, and life, that there's a me and existence, that there's a me and creation, which gives rise to the idea, the concept of existential abandonment, that I and only I have been excluded from God's love, from God's creation, implies that there are two. Implies that there is a life, an existence, a creative power that created life, that created existence, that created the world and everything in it. And I, me, stand outside of it, excluded. And I, me, am trying to merge with it. Think about that for a moment. How arrogant, how narcissistic. Reverse narcissism. To believe that you are equal, the me, the small me, is equal in power to the power of creation. That mystery that gives birth to all forms and continues to do so for eternity. You, me, small me, stands equal in power to that there is something that created that, and something that created me separate from that? No. Let the intellectual realization of that drop. Yeah, drop into the heart. Drop into the visceral sense through contemplation. Drop into the belly as an inner knowing that you are inseparable from the creative impulse that gives birth to all form, all manifestations, all that is experienced as your inner world and outer world. So how can you be separate from that? Now when you live from that inner knowing, from that beingness, from that unboundedness, yeah, it's like the self no longer is located in time and space, but becomes non-localized. Yes, there's still the experience of me operating the world and sitting here and speaking and so on, but somehow the location of that is not imprisoned here. It's here and everywhere. Then abundance becomes not something that you seek or need to feel, but it is your innate nature. Let's just try this for a moment. Close your eyes. Just breathe gently. Release on the exhale. Let the body relax. Let the mind relax. Now you may or may not have a sense of not being good enough or not being worthy enough, of having failed, of needing more, wanting more. Maybe it's more love, more happiness in relationship. Maybe it's more security or safety. Maybe it's more love from your parents. Whatever it is, you may or may not. It may be available to you now as a feeling or not, as a sense or not. If it is, then taste it. Touch it. Feel the texture of it. Feel the texture of failure. All of us have failed in some way. All of us have experienced loss in some way. It could be loss of health. Whatever it is, just allow yourself for a moment to meet it. And then taking another breath, breathe out. Relax deeper into your belly. Falling into the ocean of being. Just being. Just here. just now. To the unbounded space of this without definition. This without meaning, just this. Now, can you find failure here? Can you find not being good enough here? Can you find lack here? Is it possible that your life or your relationship or your finances or your projects or whatever it is, or your health, is it possible that these have not failed? That there is no failure? But that you have failed to see what is here. This moment is full. This moment lacks nothing. This moment is abundant because this moment gives itself to you without condition, whether it's experienced as horror or loss, as ecstasy or tragedy, as opulence or austerity. It's given to you totally. It's rich. Experience itself, the experience of existence, is rich. It's not about the content, but about the depth of your presence and the breadth of your openness. The more willing you are to open and be here to the totality of your experience, to the bittersweetness of the human experience, however it appears. And the more rich you are, the more enriched you are. And that brings a freedom from the suffering created by looking for that abundance, that love, that recognition, that worth from the circumstances of your life. So when you're ready, just gently open your eyes. See, the paradox is that the more you rest in unbounded openness of now and now and now and now, and the more free you are of the circumstances of your life, the less need you have for anything to give you anything in order to make you feel good about yourself, then the more you can give yourself to the world. Because you then have the courage to live selflessly. There's no more waiting to be good enough. There's no more waiting to be rich enough or successful enough or clever enough or creative enough or spiritual enough or safe enough in order to give yourself totally to this and this and this and this. There's no more one day I will be and then I will. It gets very subtle, especially in the spiritual world. Now, where you give your attention is the waste of time and space. If you give your attention to the me that needs things to be a certain way in order to, then life will pass you by, and the preciousness, the uniqueness, the richness, the abundance that is forever available will pass you by, or rather you will pass it by. Now, by being unwaveringly present and absolutely, without condition, open to this. That means everything that arises in you, whether that's your wounding or your difficult feelings or your sense of meaninglessness or your sense of despair or your sense of striving or this, that, the other, whatever it is, the depth of your presence and the breadth of your openness is what frees you from the horizontal dimension of suffering and allows an inner and outer alignment to take place where you are moved not by your egoic wants based on fear, based on hope, based on expectation, based on the need to know that you are lovable or good or worthy, but moved by an infinite intelligence in which you and that intelligence are one and the same. Then you are really creative, you are truly creative, you are truly intelligent, you are of service, not of service to the world because you think you are doing good things or the right things, not arising out of anger or injustice, because that arises out of division, but arising out of wholeness, which is the same as saying as arising out of love. Life takes on a completely different dimension. Yeah? And then you can live fully, and you can die empty. You live fully, courageously, you give everything. It's It's a kind of self-exposure. The concern is not for the self, and yet the self is very involved in it. Yeah? The self and intelligence, true intelligence, God's intelligence, divine intelligence, infinite intelligence, love's intelligence is one and the same. But there's a selflessness in that. Because with each breath, with each in-breath, you inhale the totality of your experience. No holds barred, nothing is excluded from that. It's not that something is worthy and something isn't unworthy. This thought is worthy and this thought is unworthy. This feeling is worthy, this feeling is unworthy. All of it is inhaled, deeply absorbed, digested, metabolized, loved to death, yeah? Transmuted on each inhale, and on each exhale, your life is released. In that moment, your story of me is released. In that moment, you die. And if that death is a physical one, that's the same. It doesn't matter whether it's in the body or not in the body. The willingness to inhale fully, to live fully, and then die fully. Die into emptiness. Die empty. Jesus said, it is harder for a rich man, or is it Hammond? It is easier for a camel to enter through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, the rich man is not somebody necessarily who's accrued a lot of material wealth or possessions, although it may well be, and is very likely to be. But what the rich man that's being referred to really is somebody who's invested a lot of meaning in what has been accumulated. Whether that accumulation is a material one, or a psychological one, or a spiritual one. Someone who's invested themselves, given a lot of meaning to what has been accumulated, and therefore carries a mountain of beliefs, self-beliefs, beliefs around worthiness and unworthiness. To put down the burden of those acquisitions means to enter this moment and this moment and this moment naked and unencumbered. Naked, without the beliefs. Living from the unknown. It's an openness, it's a curiosity. It doesn't mean you become stupid, means you become more intelligent. Yeah, I like to call it the shopping basket, the spiritual shopping basket. Yeah, it's like empty it out. Discover for yourself from your raw, direct experience. Don't carry beliefs with you. Examine them. Examine if you have invested your sense of worth in them. And then when you've emptied out the shopping basket, throw the shopping basket away as well. Live from nakedness, live from openness, live free and unencumbered by the burdens of your self-beliefs about whether you're good enough or not good enough, whether you're worthy or unworthy, whether you're loved or unloved. And then you enter the kingdom of heaven free. The kingdom of heaven is simply the unbounded space of awareness, of consciousness. You could call that love. Let's see if there are any questions. If you do have a question, I'm going to invite you to come up.
Just up here.
Yeah.
Hello?
Okay.
There might be a question in here, I'm not certain yet, but maybe there's just a response. But I guess I want to express that I'm deeply grateful for your giving light to the starkness and the rawness of that existential aloneness, that without an answer, without some sort of easy resolution to it. It's so seductive to bring oneself to that brink and then answer with awareness, or answer with love, or answer with any of the things that I found immensely valuable to see how readily there it is in all the other talks from this weekend. But giving space for that, the dark night, the reason why I find it why I'm so grateful for that is because in my own experience, there's such a sense of shame about feeling that. Like, what is so deeply wrong with me that I feel, and I've felt that way since I've been aware, you know, and I prayed into existential philosophy for a long time, didn't really find relief there, but it actually met that feeling better than spirituality in my experience, because it let it be there nakedly. And so I really appreciate giving space for that. And tears were coming up because I realized the shame that I carry around. That, am I allowed to say this in any group, any place? And there's just something so core about that. So I'm very grateful for that. And I don't know if there's anything you want to comment.
Thank you.
That wanted to come out.
Thank you for bringing that up. That shame can come up just in the feeling of this existential aloneness. Again, that's part of that conglomerate of only me, only I feel this abandonment, this terror, this aloneness. Therefore, there must be something wrong with me. Everyone else is okay. They seem to be okay. They just But only me is feeling this. So to open to that in the way that you have, to touch that, and to not know whether it is actually only you, to say, okay, I feel this strongly, but I don't know. And this meeting of that existential core wound, it's like a koan. Yeah, that's why it's a falling into the abyss. You can't fall into the abyss and know where you're going to land.
Yeah, right.
See, that's the beauty and the horror of the spiritual dimension, if we want to call it that. Yeah, it's really an existential dimension. Who am I? What does it mean? Where are we? Is that as soon as you provide an answer to that, whether it's through some understanding, whether it's through some teaching, whether it's through some belief system, or whether it's through your imagination of where it's going to take you, you have brought a safety net with you to the very thing that does not need a safety net, that must not have a safety net. Otherwise it can't be transformative. There's no transformation in it. There's no alchemical metamorphosis that happens in that. There's no revolution of consciousness in that, out of the time-space located self, if we believe there's a safety net. A safety net means, well, if I surrender to this, then I'll wake up. If I surrender to this, then I'll be okay. No safety net. That's why it's a koan. It's a koan. Yeah, it's a question without an answer, and you are required or compelled, if it compels you. Yeah, like Ajahn Shanti said, it's not something that you force. Yeah, many people come to me and they hear about my experience, which I don't often speak about because I find it then sets out a template. Yeah, I actually don't speak about it. This is a rare occasion. Yeah, because I don't want them to have an idea of how it is, and they say, I want what you have. If I fall into the abyss, show me how, then I'll be free. It doesn't work that way. In some ways, I was lucky that I didn't have that understanding. I didn't have that spiritual path laid out to me. So it really was an unknown, totally unknown. And in that unknownness, such a terror, and yet such a compulsion to fall into it, to give myself to it, even if it meant the end of me and everything that I know as this and my life. It's like a love affair. That abyss must be like a love affair. It must pull you and pull you and pull you, and you go screaming to the edge, and the ego goes, no, what about me? What about me? My life is going to collapse, and so on. But you at the core of you that is love, it's just drawn to it, because it's love meeting love. So even these words, they're going to cloud things for you. Don't let these words be obscurations. It's actually better not to say anything. I sometimes just want to stop speaking, because whatever is said becomes something that the mind then grasps onto and wants to do it that way, wants to follow that path and wants that certainty. All I know is that real freedom is living from the unknown. Whenever I think I know something, how life is, how spirituality is, how this is or that is, I give it up. I give it up. I give it up. But I no longer have to give it up. It sort of gives up itself. Because it's like a pollutant. Yeah, knowing on that level is like a pollutant. It pollutes the clear light of consciousness. So living from the unknown, and believe me, it doesn't make you more stupid, it makes you more intelligent. Because you are moved by something greater than the small me. You are moved by the impulse of creation. And then miracles happen. Infinite possibilities. And sometimes they're challenging, and sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes it's shaky, and sometimes it's uncertain, and sometimes it's turbulent, and sometimes it touches on some old memory of some old wound. But so what? So what? Really? These are just waves, ripples on the ocean of consciousness. The ocean cannot be touched. The ocean is just returning to the ocean. We're already dead. We're dying in each moment. Life is just a preparation for the ocean merging with itself. What happens in between doesn't actually matter. But you might as well make it as spectacular, as rich in its horror and its glory. Because once it's gone, it's gone. It's unique, it's precious. What hurts isn't the circumstances of your life, what you have or what you don't have, what you've achieved and what you haven't achieved, and so on and so forth, what you've created and what you haven't created, what good you've done, what bad you've done. That's not what matters. What matters is how the richness of this experience, in all its horror and all its glory, all its ups and all its downs, all its comings, all its goings, all its revelations and all its confusion and all its heartbreaks and all its losses, and the richness of that. What matters is the richness of that and how it is experienced as that richness. It is full. It is full. It is always full. Life is always giving itself to you totally, unadulteratedly, unconditionally. Who are you to reject that? There's a humility in allowing the full richness of life, in its darkness, in its light, in its maras, in its transcendence, all of it. All of it. Are there any other questions? having fulfilled your purpose.
Testing. Hi, thank you. Your personal history of the very difficult childhood is, profound in its difficulty. Can people open up to simply what is, and in an existential way, be so true to that they can experience the same primal level of exposing themselves?
Thank you. Well, the truth is, I don't know. I think there's a mystery to how that revelation of freedom reveals itself in each individual. I don't think there's a way. I don't think you can say, well, I've done it like this, therefore it's like this, or there's a process like this. That's where grace comes in, and I know it's an overused word in spiritual world, but I just don't know. I know it is possible given the depth of my challenges and suffering. So it is possible. And I've had a lot of perhaps preparation for that. So whilst I think there is a grace involved in it, that we just don't know how or when that will happen, there's two things. One is the preparation, what I call the purification of the mind-body vehicle. And that's where the psychotherapeutic context is an absolute support and vital. Because without some self-reflection, without some support and guidance in being able to meet these difficulties and traumas which have been locked in, like for instance for me, like I said, no psychotherapist could help me because I would sit in absolute silence. I don't know if you've read The Bell Jar, Sylvia Plath, but that was me. There was a glass jar and there was nobody and nothing that could penetrate that, because the first place is the admittance that one is suffering, and I would not admit that. So dense was my horror and pain and disconnection. So in that instance, something needs to break that barrier. Yeah. So yes, there is a purification that happens that starts to unravel some of that density. So that needs to happen. In my case, a lot of that had happened before that meeting of the existential core wound could be met. I don't think it could have been before that, because when it was there, when it did reveal itself before that, that's when suicidal attempts would happen, because that's the only way. It's like the self took ownership of it, and that existential abyss was taken to be an even more strong proof that there's something wrong with me. Yeah, as you mentioned. Yeah, so somewhere there needs to be a softening of the me and its capacity, and an opening of its capacity to feel. So certainly in my experience, even though I say it was happened in a very raw, direct way, there was a lot of preparation. Yeah, not a preparation with an agenda to get anywhere, but I just had to, because I was so disconnected from myself and from life that I had to do something. Yeah. So, and then the other thing that needs to happen is somewhere along that path, if you like, or that process at any stage, is the conscious willingness. Yeah? That's where we take responsibility. To be consciously willing to turn attention to that. Nobody else can do that for you. That's not grace. Grace is the revelation, is the release, is the opening. Yeah, you can't do that, you can't force that, that's not where the effort is. But your conscious willingness to give attention to that deeper wound to examine that, to investigate it, and to not keep giving attention to the me and its likes and dislikes and wants and wanting to feel good, but to give up wanting to feel good or not good in some ways, yeah? To stop the search. That you have power over, that you can, yeah? And you have to be honest in yourself as to whether you're willing, yeah? That's the willingness that I have described in my story, where there came a point when the barren landscape, the dark night of the soul, where I was consciously willing to give everything to that. I mean, I could have turned away from it, yeah? I could have just wanted to feel good again. I mean, my tendency in those days was to pick up a spiritual book. Yeah? I'm an avid reader, or I was an avid reader, and I would pick out, I have a massive library. So I lived alone at the time. I lived in the city of London, so it doesn't have to happen in an ashram. It's in the middle of the city of London, living alone, an ordinary life. And I loved reading, so I would read everything from, I don't know, all sorts of books, self-development books, self-help books, inspiring books, uplifting books, spiritual books, everything. And I loved reading, so I noticed how that was my safety net. That I would, this would rear its head, this discomfort, this, yeah, aloneness, this, and I would read a book and it would give me great solace, it would inspire me, it would soothe me, it would distract me, it would take up time and space in my life. And that was a giving my attention to the seeking mechanism, the seeking of wanting to feel good about myself, to feel comfortable, to feel like I was on the right track, that I could meditate and uplift myself and read something inspiring and life was okay, and yeah, and all of this. But when that was seen as futile, it's been done 1,000,000 times before, and has it brought freedom? No, temporary relief. When that was seen, then I could wholeheartedly, 100%, even though I had no idea of the outcome, give myself to the meeting of what is. And what is was the dark abyss. I could not deny it anymore. I could not deny life. That's what life was giving me. That's what life was offering me. That's what life was seducing. It was like a seduction. Come, come, come. Be annihilated, be extinguished, fall into this. Come, it's a love affair. Yeah. Yes. Microphone?
It's very touchy what you're saying. But when I investigate deeper into, I have to, no, I don't disagree. I want to get deeper into this so that it touches me deeper. When I investigate into, if this is a notion, maybe it's philosophical, I don't know what am I asking, but if this is all an ocean and the waves come in this ocean, isn't it okay also that I keep looking around and making this mistake? Isn't that beautiful that life is expressing in this insanity of trying to find an answer also? What's wrong with like doing that? If it's part of the, what if life was trying to learn through making this
An
mistake?
answer to what? You said looking for an answer.
What
An
is
answer to
that?
what? What are you looking for?
Because it's almost, there is a little sense, to me, being honest, is like there's a little bit of a sense that there's something wrong
In
something. Like there's something wrong. Like there's something wrong in a book or doing it 1,000,000 times. It's so beautiful that it's been done 1,000,000 times.
Yes,
It's not?
yes, all of it is included. The waves are not excluded. All of it. You're seeking, you're wanting, you're striving, you're absorbing. I'm not saying don't read a book or anything. This is why I often don't speak about my experience, because the way that it happened for me is not the way that it happens for you. It's totally unique. Totally unique. Totally unique. It has to reveal itself authentically for you. But when I ask, what is it that you want? What is it that isn't looking for an answer? then you have to find what that is so that you are not getting lost in the waves. Okay? All the waves are experienced. Let's put it a different way. If you're seeking an answer, whatever this is for, yeah, we haven't got to that bit yet. What's the answer to? What are you looking for? Yeah? If that does not create suffering in you, then throw everything that I say away. If it feeds you and nourishes you and brings peace, not a peace that comes and goes depending on what you're doing or having or finding, or yeah, but a peace that has nothing to do with your circumstances. If that's the case, then this is life proliferating through you, which is, I think, is what you're trying to say. It's full, yeah? There are many permutations, yeah? But, yeah, just a second, but, and that's why it's different for each of us. If something happens, that's why it's different, yeah? If something happens in your life, a loss, a heartbreak, a car accident, you lose your limbs, you lose your beloved, your career comes crashing down, you're left penniless, homeless, or whatever. If, and this is not everybody's experience, then what? Then what? And until you come to that, then perhaps what I call the vertical inquiry doesn't arise in you, and then you just enjoy what is coming to you. You enjoy your seeking and your reading, and yeah, there's no judgment on that. Was there something else to say?
That was the answer.
Siri knows all.
Siri knows everything. I feel like it's beyond what you're saying. Yeah. There's something about accepting the beautiful mistake of humanity. I think that is precious to me as a journey.
Absolutely.
More than beyond me or beyond you. There's something about that I wanna accept more.
Absolutely.
Including,
Absolutely.
I just want to say that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. There are no mistakes. Yes. Question?
I'm probably just going to burst into tears.
So, you've just been describing my life lately. I've been so lucky to see John, and it's been a wonderful journey. Just, I almost don't want to repeat everything you've said. Just after a 25-year marriage, up went in smoke, everything. My kids left home because they graduated and went on anyway. Just adapting to living alone. And I've been working with it lately just as a metaphor of a past life of exile. Just exile. How do you have the will to move forward? When I'm around other people, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And then when I'm alone, it's just how do you want to keep living? And I'm not suicidal. And when I'm around people, I'm absolutely happy.
Yeah. Here it is.
Yeah.
Here it is. It's calling you. That's why I say it's completely different for everybody, yeah? Come to me when you're suffering. Yeah? If you're enjoying your life and you're learning, and most people here are learning to be therapists, and this stands a wonderful college, so you're still absorbing life. Great, beautiful. All that is part of it. But come to me when you're broken. Then I might be useful to you. Yeah? Here it is calling to you. Here it is calling to you. In the quiet moments. Yeah, no trying, no forcing, there's no path, there's no way. But in the quiet moments of your aloneness, just see the movement that wants to retract from it. See the movement that wants to have the will to live, because somehow having the will to live will keep you survived. Yeah, that's your survival. See what happens when you don't have the will to live. In that moment, it's a moment. It just takes a nanosecond. It may have to be revisited over and over again. But in that moment, are you willing to let go even of the idea that you have to have or hold on to the will to live? What happens if you die in that moment? It's a relaxation. That's all it is. It's a relaxation. Now, no forcing, no trying, but just see if these words touch you on that level. Because you are alone anyway.
Yeah.
In this moment, and with your friends, yeah? Just see in your quiet moments, it's the invitation of the beloved. It's the beloved calling you to discover something more real, more true.
It is that place that just says that God said no. There is that place that just said, I don't know, there's a feeling I did something or what. You know, just that feeling that I did, that I was cast out. Yes, I know here, but you know, down there, there's a heart hurt, and the heart, and you say to it, and it just hurts.
Yeah. Well, do the work that you need to do. Do the support that needs to be given to this. And also just see if in you there is an opening to it. Come what may. Come what may. Discover whether you live or die. Discover if you are free or in pain. Is it an eternal damnation? Discover. It's an eternal damnation in your mind, but that comes from not discovery. In the mind, it stays as an imagination, as a fantasy that I am in eternal damnation. And if I give my attention to it or fall into it, then that's even more eternal damnation. Discover. That's the prison. That is the eternal damnation. Discover. Be willing to discover whether it is or it isn't. You have nothing to lose. You're already in pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just touch it. It's like a lake, a deep pool. Dip your toe in it. Come back if you need to. Dip your toe in it. Just let it call you, because it will reveal itself if that is your path, if that is your doorway to freedom.
Thank you.
Take courage from the fact that
Yeah.
it's okay. It actually is okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, how are we doing for time? Yes.
No.
Can we have one more question? Yes, we can.
Thank you. And thank you. I thought that was amazingly brave.
Thank you.
You can feel something waiting to happen. In terms of the masculine core wound, are you suggesting that there's an actual death, a total death of the ego that can somehow occur to end that we're all waiting for it? Right.
I don't know if that needs an answer. Maybe that was the ultimate go-ahead. I'll just say this. In that moment of surrender, ego dies and then awakens as the servant. Ego dies as the master through that surrender. But you have to have an ego, a sense of self, to operate in the world, as we've heard in great clarity and detail. You have to. There has to be a sense of me here and you there, otherwise we wouldn't be able to operate. We'd all be bumping into each other and it'd just be a big mess. I mean, it's already enough of a mess, but it'd be more of a mess. Yeah, so the I disappears in that moment. It's extinguished. But it's reborn, it's resurrected. It's resurrected as the servant of awakeness. It bows down to awakeness, which means that then life is lived in, how shall I put it? Life is lived always with the, it sort of becomes organic. It's not forced at that point, but attention is always given to that which is true, that which is real. That which is true and that which is real is your direct naked experience of now and now and now and now. There's no more hiding, there's no more waiting, there's no more begging for salvation, there's no more hoping, there's no more bartering, with life. If I do this, then will you love me? Will I be loved? Will I get what I want? Will I be safe? Yeah, no more begging, no more bartering, no more hoping for salvation. Yeah, it's lived nakedly. So ego, the I, is given in service to that organically from that point on. Yeah, so in that sense, it's resurrected, it's reborn. Yeah. Ego is sacrificed on the altar of God, on the cross of samsara, of polarity, of good, bad, worthiness, unworthiness. Sacrificed on that altar and resurrected as the aware ego. The aware ego is given in service to awakeness, to truth, to light. It is Christ consciousness. So then there is a me, an I, that continues to operate, but I am not in opposition to, I am not trying to overpower the innate intelligence that moves through me as me. So then my responses and my actions and my decisions, even though they may appear as mistakes, on the human level they may appear as right or wrong or mistakes or I should have done that. It's not how it's experienced, but it may appear. It's not perfect, but that it's moved by an innate intelligence, which is a rightness. Yeah, even if it's wrong, it's right. Do you know what I mean? It's right. There's no question. It's just an organic impulse. Maybe it's a little bit how animals operate. Yeah, it's instinctive. I know, go here, don't go there. Sometimes it might get overridden, but then it's only overridden if there's an agenda, and that doesn't feel good. Whenever that does happen, if it does happen, say what I said before, it's like a pollutant. It pollutes. It's actually quite sickening. Yeah, and then there's quickly a realignment or a learning from that. But it's not about being perfect. Yeah, it's just natural and effortless. Yeah, and then there's a freedom, not just in the internal experience, but there's a freedom in the external as well. Yeah? And you can still do what you do. You can still have your creative projects and learn your tools and techniques and build your home and take care of the body and you know, all of this can be taken care of, because then what needs to be taken care of gets taken care of naturally. Sometimes that takes time, and there are certain skills or lessons or tools or strengths we develop as a human being, and there's an ongoing process of growth that happens depending on our karma and depending on what we've been born into. for me, but being born into the circumstances that I've been born to, I have a lot to learn about building a more financially secure place in my life. It's always been denied and ignored. And there's something to learn in that on a human level, to have a safe base, knowing that safety, that base can be taken away in any moment. We could be obliterated in an instant. The world could blow up. I know that. I was a child, and one minute I'm playing in the garden, and the next minute there's a bomb dropping. So I know that it can be snatched away just like that. In any moment, this body could be damaged. I could walk across the road and it's gone. In any moment, my beloved, who might walk in at any moment, could be run over, and that's the end of that. And yet there is much to learn and grow and build. But all of that is done naturally, organically, without this sense of trying to protect me and mine. I've already been extinguished. Not only internally, but externally, over and over again. There's nothing to lose, there's nothing to gain. Just death. Anyway, namaste. Thank you. Thank you for being here and listening.